Welcome back to the Glazov Gang. I'm Anne-Marie Morel, National Director, Editor-in-Chief of Politichicks.tv, filling in for Dr. Jamie Glazov. And this is unconfirmed, but I heard that Jamie is somewhere hunting albino hedgehogs with Mounties. That's unconfirmed. I'm not sure, but it's possibly true. We're going to check into that. But I'm here tonight with one of his best writers, Daniel Greenfield. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thank you.
All right. I want to talk to you about a lawyer who's in jail, who's been in jail. Lynn Stewart. You wrote an article called Obama Frees a Terror Lawyer. She was released on, it was called a compassionate release from the Justice Department, which I hate to call them Justice Department. She has cancer. She was the attorney for Omar Abdel Rahman, or the Blind Sheik. Please tell us who Lynn Stewart is, and does she deserve compassion?
Well, you know, New York City has a minor industry in terrorist trials. We've been having these for decades, unfortunately. And with terror trials come terror lawyers. We have an entire subspecialty of terrorist lawyers, which are people who spend a lot of their time defending terrorists. They've had a lot more business since September 11th. Now, these people are not just professionals, they're not just doing their job, they're not just following orders, they enthusiastically support terrorists. A lot of these people are ex-left-wing, not really ex, but they're left-wing radicals who moved from supporting and defending the Black Panthers, the Weathermen, to defending the modern domestic terrorists and international terrorists of Islam. Lynn Stewart is the perfect example of that. She did her time defending the Black Panthers and the Weathermen. She did her time in all these movements. Then she went on to defend Islamic terrorists. Then she went on to defend the Blind Sheikh, which really became her undoing. Now, the Blind Sheikh was close to the original bombers of the World Trade Center, and those were, the perpetrator of that was actually the nephew of the planner of the September 11th attacks. And along the way, the Blind Sheikh came up with a plan to bomb major New York City landmarks, including the Holland Tunnel and the United Nations. He was caught, he was put away in jail. But what a lot of New Yorkers who were really seeing this kind of freaky sort of person on the covers of tabloids didn't understand was that he was also the leader of an Egyptian terrorist organization. Now, these days, Al-Qaeda is basically Egyptian-run and had a big Egyptian presence even under Osama bin Laden. To some extent, really, the Egyptians were running the Al-Qaeda even under Osama bin Laden. But by that point, this was the terror sheikh was actually running a splinter group from the Muslim Brotherhood, and they were still carrying out horrifying terrorist attacks back in Egypt. One of those attacks was the Luxor massacre, in which European tourists were horribly and brutally murdered. Now, the group was getting its orders, its marching orders, from the terror sheikh who was in a prison in New York, and he was under specific restrictions that he wasn't supposed to be allowed to do that. He wasn't supposed to be passing messages. He was supposed to be under restrictions. So Lynn Stewart, who was not only his lawyer and his supporter, conspired to help him pass these messages. And one of those messages was a declaration that the ceasefire between the Islamic group, which was his terrorist organization, and the Egyptian government had been ended. And that meant the terrorist attacks would be restarting all over again. So she was put in jail for that. And now she's been given a compassionate release, which is a very rare thing, because really clearly somebody in the Justice Department likes her.
Why? Why?
Well, the Justice Department these days is full of terrorist supporters. It's full of terrorist lawyers. There are 7 to 9 terrorist lawyers. There are lawyers who defended major terrorists who are really near the top of the hierarchy in the Justice Department, including in the number 3 spot.
No one's hearing anything. They're not making a big deal about her release in the news, of course. How do we get this message out there? This is important. No one's talking about it. Why?
Well, we're talking about it, but the news can't be expected to talk about it because the news is the news, and the news really is the house organ of Obama Inc., and that's what we're dealing with. But this is just one of the characteristic points, just like Fast and Furious and so many of the other things that Obama has done, just like his deal with Iran, that shows really that he can't be trusted with American national security, that his sympathies lie somewhere else, that really in some ways he's not that different from Lynn Stewart.
Okay, well, so she has cancer. She's probably going to die. Do you think, is she still a threat to America?
She might die, she might not. I'm not terribly convinced by that. You know, they let the the Libyan bomber go on a compassionate release, and he lived for quite a few years before he died. So this might be a thing, this might not be a thing. And really the question is, why does she get a compassionate release? There are plenty of prisoners with serious cases of cancer in the prison system.
Who weren't passing messages to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, who weren't responsible for basically helping kill people. So I would have to wonder, why was she chosen? Why aren't we letting everybody with cancer out of prison?
Talk about the child that was killed indirectly because of her.
One of the tourists at the Luxor massacre who was killed was a child. That was the youngest victim. There were honeymooning couples. It was a very horrific scene. We don't know everything that happened there, but the eyewitness testimonies really relate people being mutilated. There was a note calling for the release of the blind sheikh found in a disemboweled body. It was a genuinely horrifying scene. Now, incidentally, when Morsi came to power, he released a lot of the people responsible. And he actually appointed a member of that terrorist group to be the governor in Luxor.
Oh, my gosh. I hear these stories, and it's just dumbfounding to me that this country isn't completely standing on their feet, demanding that she be sent back to prison. Everyone was so upset about Duck Dynasty. That's what bothers me about America right now, that they were furious about a TV show, but something like this is happening right now, and it's you and me talking about it. What's the deal, Daniel?
Well, people have very short memories. That's one problem. The other problem is that it's harder to get this kind of mass information coverage out there because we don't control the media, which is kind of a shame because, if we did, we'd have better cameras, for one thing. But we have to build this up. So we have to really look at the left. The left didn't take over the entertainment industry, the media, in a single day. They built up slowly. If you look at Air America, there was a time when they were just sitting there very much nearly in their basements. Mm-hmm. And they worked their way slowly, bit by bit. If we go back to the 50s or the 60s, they were very weak. They really could not have this kind of presence that they had today. Mm-hmm. So, we can take an example from that. We're organized. We're working slowly, steadily toward a goal. It's not a goal that we're going to reach tomorrow. It's not going to go that we're going to reach next week, but we're part of a movement. And that's what's important to remember.
One more thing about Lynn Stewart. She's never apologized. She's not sorry for anything she's done, right?
Not only is she not sorry, she said that she would do it all over again.
Wow. And she's out in the streets, folks. Yay. I'm going to move to Egypt now. You wrote one of my favorite pieces on your Sultan Kanish blog. And I'm saying it right? Sultan Kanish?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's my favorite title of all time. Egypt is where history goes to die. You wrote that on August 26, 2013. One of my politichicks, Liz Harrison, she's a Pennsylvania politichick, wrote, "Where do you see the next government in Egypt going? Islamist, another more moderate Mubarak type, military-controlled, or other, and why?"
Well, we've really reverted back to the Mubarak era. Mubarak was military to begin with. The current system in Egypt happened because the free officers who were basically trained by the British were Egyptian officers took over the country, and they basically retaken it back. Now, the thing to remember about these systems is that they're also socialist in their own way, and they have these kind of crony capitalist monopoly setups. So the Egyptian army isn't just the military, it's also a huge microeconomy. They control a lot of industries, they control monopolies. They have, for example, their own detergent factories. And this is actually across the region. You have the same thing in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard has a lot of construction businesses. So you have these types of monopolies pitting themselves against each other. The Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, also has its network of businesses, not just in Egypt, but also in the United States and around the world. So in Egypt, they've reverted back to military control, but it was always military control. Now they've just got a guy in a uniform. Mubarak wasn't sitting in a uniform, but Mubarak was also military.
I interviewed Noni Darwish last year, and she told me that Egypt can have 1 million revolutions, but as long as the majority of the people continue supporting Sharia, it's never going to change. Is that the case? Is Egypt dead?
It's not going to change fundamentally, but this is really the baseline in most Islamic countries. They've got say 40% Sharia law, and that's actually an improvement because the alternative to 40% or 50% or even 60% Sharia law is 100% Sharia law. Then you end up with something like Saudi Arabia, which is a complete nightmare, where women basically can't even leave the house. So as bad as it is, it could be worse. Now, I'm not using the term moderate or extremist because what these systems really do, they're not moderate by any stretch of the imagination. What they do is they filter the Islamic law to some extent. They don't do it straight. It's Islamic law in water. It's Islamic law in Coca-Cola. It's not straight Islamic law because that really puts you in a very scary place. And that's really what's going on in Syria now, where they would like to have 100% Islamic law. And you're seeing completely insane verdicts. For example, Al-Qaeda in Syria just issued a bulletin forbidding women from sitting in chairs, which is the sort of insanity you get when you have 100% Islamic law.
Wait, they from sitting in chairs? Why?
Yes.
Why?
I don't actually know. There's a long list. Men are not allowed to cut their hair, or wear low-waist jeans, or use hair product, and women are not allowed to sit in chairs. So
I can
they've got
understand the
their
rest
own-
of that, but not the sit. I don't get the sit in chairs. I'm going to have to really think on that one. I don't.
Yeah,
That's
they're
weird.
not exactly the sanest people around. It's not exactly the sanest religion around.
True. My Illinois politic, Leslie Deinhammer, wanted me to ask you. I loved Daniel's term for Obama's Middle East foreign policy as Operation Caliphate. How do the Iranian bilateral talks or concessions and his red line retreat from Syria play into his march towards American obsolescence and Sharia supremacy?
Well, that's a good question. The thing with Obama, though, is that he's sort of like the really slow kid on the playground. If you push him enough, then he topples over. So Iran pushed him and he toppled over. Obama is also very much a creature of the left. So in those terms, when there's a bad relationship between the United States and another country that's hostile to the United States, he assumes it's America's fault. So if you push him, if you act hostile toward him, he starts bowing and apologizing because he assumes that America's at fault. So the Muslim Brotherhood did it, and he toppled over. Iran is doing it, and he toppled over. Those things are in conflict. The Muslim Brotherhood is fighting Iran, but they're both against the United States, so he topples over.
Christians, Coptic Christians worldwide, Christians are being slaughtered, not hearing much from churches in America. Well, here in America, anti-Semitism is on the rise. You've been writing a lot about that. It started with the knockout games targeting Jewish people. And then now there's this new canal, this French inverted Nazi salute that's going around, and some celebrities are doing it. And again, the Jewish community isn't speaking out. Why? On both accounts, Christians and Jewish people. Why? Why?
Well, again, there are variations. You've got liberal churches, you've got liberal synagogues who are not actually remotely interested in standing up for their brethren. But I think the more traditional Jewish and Christian communities are actually speaking out, again, but they're not really being heard because, again, we're very liberal dominated. When they look for spokesmen, they look for spokesmen who come from liberal backgrounds. So people who are evangelicals or Orthodox Jews have trouble being heard.
But once again, I'm going to go back to Duck Dynasty. They were heard. Everyone heard that. I just feel like someone like Pastor Saeed Abedini, who's been in an Iranian prison. This was his second Christmas. He's a Christian, and that's the reason he's in prison there. If his name were Beyonce, I've said this before, he wouldn't have been in prison for 5 minutes. Do you agree with that, or am I just wrong? What's wrong with our culture? Is that what this is? It's just a cultural disintegration?
I don't think it is a cultural disintegration as much because really a lot of what we think of as pop culture, the trash out there, it's a weapon of mass distraction to get people not to pay attention to the things that truly matter. So a lot of this garbage, a lot of this stuff is junk that's actually deliberately circulated out there so that people won't really look too much at how their freedoms are being taken away. We do have to get better at communicating these things in a punchy way that connects to people. We're the insurgents, we're the underdog, and we really have to get better at that.
Well, that's what you do all the time. And all of us are learning from you in the media, by the way. Thank you very much. I wrote to you recently. This is embarrassing, but I did write to you, and I told you, I don't want to write anymore. Because when I read what you write, that's writing. That makes everyone else. I just don't feel like I should write anymore. I want to talk to you about this new Bush resurrection. You wrote about it today, that Brian Williams at NBC, speaking of weapon of mass distraction. What did you say? Mass distraction. Brian Williams at NBC is blaming Bush for the new surge in Iraq, and protesters are blaming Bush for Benghazi because he released a Gitmo. So is he still president? Should we just re-elect him? Get it over with?
Apparently we're on the fourth term of George W. Bush, which is really a huge relief, because I thought there was some incompetent Illinois state senator who was running the country into the ground. But apparently the leadership was a little better than that. But as you've mentioned before, the New York Times tried its hoax that it was just a YouTube video. Again, Al-Qaeda was not involved. That got shut down. So, the Ready for Hillary 2016 campaign is defaulting to its second talking point, which is that it was Bush's fault. Now, there's a problem with that because, first of all, the Center for Constitutional Rights, which actually pushed for the release, was part of the left. It has connections to Holder. It has connections to Obama. And second of all, this guy would not have been running around free if Obama had not actually overthrown Gaddafi and implemented regime change in Libya. And that's really the issue here. Obama decided to implement regime change in Libya. He did it illegally. He did it without going to Congress. He did it against the wishes of the American people. He did it while repeatedly lying and claiming that he was not implementing regime change. And that's really the context for Benghazi that a lot of people are forgetting. Obama launched an illegal war. It was a disastrous war. It had disastrous consequences.
Why, though? Do they really, is the only thing they have Bush? Is that it?
Oh, it's worked for them so far, and they don't really have anything going for it. The Soviet Union, for the longest time, even in the 60s and the 70s, when they dealt with any problem, they would say, we inherited this from the previous regime. And they could do this for 40 years, for 50 years. It didn't even matter because they're not actually responsible for anything. They see themselves as insurgents. They're rebels. They never take responsibility for anything. They never take ownership of anything. It's never their war. It's never their thing. It's always something that they somehow stumbled into and try to fix, but it's somebody else's fault.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Daniel, I thank you so much for being here tonight. I really do. I have so much respect for you. You know that. I think at one point Jamie said you were going to put a restraining order out on me because I talk about you so much. But you write, Front Page Magazine, The Point, Sultan Kanish, everyone, please, please, please find Daniel Greenfield and read him every single day. What he's saying is really important. And the great thing about you, Daniel, you're able to reach every level of political knowledge for people. I mean, you can reach the highest echelon and the lowest. You're good for everybody. There's something there for all of us. And I'm going to end with my very, very favorite Daniel Greenfield article. It's from your Sultan Kanish blog. It's called The Sun Sets on Washington, D.C., and you wrote it October 2nd, 2013. And I'm going to try not to cry because every time I've read this particular passage, it really gets to me. The sun has set over Versailles, and the sun isn't supposed to set. I'd rather be on the farm than be emperor of the world, George Washington said. Now the city named after him has become the home of a new sun king and his empire of government workers. The farms have closed. The factories have been shut down, but the government buildings continue to rise. Yesterday, the sun set on Washington, D.C. May it rise one day on a new nation whose leaders would rather be farmers than emperors. Good night, and thank you for watching The Glazov Gang.